Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Councillor Steele, Acting Mayor, and I'm going to call the Council-in-Committee meeting to order. Our first delegation is Frances Tang Graham, Municipal and Community Engagement Advisor for Public Affairs, Port Metro, Vancouver. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Cliff Stewart, and I'm the Vice President of Infrastructure with Port Metro, Vancouver. I'm here today to speak primarily about the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project, but also to touch on a number of other related Surrey and port issues. First of all, I just want to remind Council about the significant port activities in Surrey, in particular the over $3 million in municipal taxes from port activities and the more than 1,800 port jobs in Surrey. The transportation and logistics sector in Surrey, of which port activities are an important component, represent a quarter of jobs in Surrey. Port Metro Vancouver, as you are probably aware, is the largest port in Canada, the fourth largest port in North America, and fully 20% of all of Canada's trade in goods passes through Port Metro Vancouver. The port's responsible for over 100,000 jobs across Canada. Our mandate is to facilitate Canada's trade. We recognize the need to balance this with safety, security, protection of the environment, and mitigating the impact of port activities on neighboring communities. We work for the benefit of all Canadians. As I mentioned, the main reason I'm here today is to talk about the Roberts Bank Terminal 2 project. I'm sure that Council has seen this graphic before. This represents the proposed new container terminal at Roberts Bank, currently under review by the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency and subject to an independent review panel process over the next several years. This project is anticipated to come on stream in the early 2020s to help meet Canada's need for container trade off the west coast with primarily Asia. It's important to remember that container trade for Canada is not just about imports of manufactured goods from Asia, but also the export of both manufactured goods and processed goods and agricultural products from Canada. This forecast really is the fundamental basis for why we're proposing to build the project. And that's a very complicated looking graphic, and I wouldn't ask you to try and understand it today, but it speaks to the basis or the rationale for the project. And we have available on our website at robertsbankterminal2.com about a 50-page rationale. So if you're interested in understanding more about why this project at this time in this place, we have that information available. As I mentioned, the project is currently in an environmental review process being led by the Canadian Environmental Assessment Agency. It's a parallel process, and the provincial government through the BC Environmental Assessment Office is also participating. We're currently in a 5-month environmental impact statement completeness review period. It's the first 5 months of a 24-month process, and that process can take as much time as the panel and the government feels is necessary. Whenever the government asks a question of the proponent, of us in this case, they stop the clock. So it's not less than 24 months. We expect it'll probably be more in the neighborhood of 36 months for the permitting process. There are a number of public input opportunities through that process. In fact, we're currently in a 45-day public comment period on the completeness of the environmental impact statement, which Port Metro Vancouver submitted at the end of March. I just want to speak briefly about that environmental impact statement. It follows on the completion of 77 separate environmental studies in the Roberts Bank area and elsewhere, over 35,000 hours of field work, 100-plus professional scientists, actually advancing the broad scientific understanding of the ecosystem of the Fraser River estuary. We're very proud of the work that the scientists have done on this. The conclusions of the environmental impact statement are that after mitigation, the terminal project will not have any significant adverse residual effects on the environment, and that there will be no cumulative effects, with the sole exception of a very minor cumulative effect on southern resident killer whales. Finally, we're confident that the adverse effects can be partially avoided or reduced through project design and the implementation of environmental management programs. I also want to touch briefly on an issue much closer to your interest here in Surrey, the Fraser-Surrey Docks project. You've probably heard that the tenant is considering applying for an amendment to their permit to change the method of shipment from barges to ocean-going vessels. The proponent, Fraser-Surrey Docks, is currently conducting pre-application consultation on the scope of studies for that application. There is no increase to the coal volume that's intended to be shipped, and Port Metro Vancouver has not actually yet received a formal permit application. Once that happens, we will be asking municipalities for comment on the project. I want to talk now about recent collaborations. In particular, the soon-to-be completed Yes campaign. Port Metro Vancouver was an early and significant participant in the Yes campaign, including financial and staff resources to help run the program. Like Surrey, we're a strong supporter. We believe that the Mayor's plan, not only does it provide important answers to questions about transit, but also about goods movement throughout the region. I'd also like to just celebrate for a moment the recently completed Roberts Bank Rail Corridor program, which saw the construction of a number of significant rail overpasses in the city of Surrey. The port helped to pull that program together nearly a decade ago, and it has been extremely successful. And in fact, we've used it as a template to launch a new program called the Gateway Transportation Collaboration Forum, which looks to build on the successes of the Asia-Pacific Gateway and Corridor Initiative, particularly in the area of the new Build Canada Fund. And I know that Surrey is working in the trade area, Roberts Bank and Fraser River trade areas, to look at addressing transportation needs both for the port and for the city. Thank you very much. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to address them now.
Thank you. Councillor Villeneuve.
Thank you very much. I wanted clarification on your remark about the amendment that Fraser Docks is proposing to its proposal for the coal shipping. And you said that they had not yet put in an application to Port Metro for that change and that amendment. And could you clarify, did I hear that incorrectly?
No, you heard that correctly. They have not yet submitted an application for the amendment.
So I'm wondering why they asked for public consultation on that amendment and only gave a 3-week period of time for that public consultation.
Public consultation before submission of an environmental permit application is fairly standard practice. I can speak to the Terminal 2 project that I mentioned earlier. We started public consultation 4 years before submitting the application, so it's a way to ensure that when the application goes in, it broadly reflects the interests.
Well, I just have a comment that 3 weeks of public consultation is a very short period of time, and particularly on a project that had some widespread public interest. So I'm hoping that, I know that there were other cities that have expressed that concern, that was such a limited amount of time, and that there will be other opportunities with more full information on that amendment and change, because the information was very scarce. And I think that certainly from a City Council point of view, I'd really like to see, and we expressed some things in a letter regarding this amendment, a lot more sort of discussion on not only the health impacts, but also the stormwater permitting and various things, and the flooding changes and elevation levels that will have to be addressed with a change like this. That was never discussed in the original proposal. It was discussed that things would be barged from that port to Texada Island, and all of a sudden we're talking about ships picking up the coal. So I don't have a picture of what that really is going to entail, or whether at times the coal is going to be stored on site, or how you might be dealing with the runoff from that area or for the transfer. So just to express that opinion, but 3 weeks consultation period is a bit absurd on a project of this size.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Hepner.
Just following up on Councillor Villeneuve's point, because as you were suggesting that it would be ships coming up the Fraser River, is that going to require more dredging, or how will those ships be able to access? Because right now, as my understanding is, they cannot.
No ships of that size regularly come up to Fraser Surrey docks for other commodities.
So it's of a size that can currently be accommodated?
Again, having not seen the application, that is our understanding, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hayne.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks for the presentation. And I've had the opportunity to sit on the committee that's looking at the T2 project as a member municipality. And I'm just wondering what further plans there's going to be for rail separation. Is Port Metro Vancouver looking at participating in more rail separation projects than the ones that have now been worked on and completed to date with respect to the addition of T2?
Thank you very much. So the Gateway Transportation Collaboration Forum that I mentioned, one of the first projects in that collaboration is an updated study for the Roberts Bank Rail Corridor to look at both the new rail traffic volumes and the new road traffic volumes in the several municipalities that the rail travels through, to answer exactly that question, whether there are additional grade separations that might be required as a result of T2 traffic.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Seeing no more questions from Council, I just want to thank you very much for your presentation and answered our questions, and I'm sure there'll be lots more coming.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Our second delegation is Christine Moore and Charlene Weddle from Options Community Services, Kim Anderson, YMCA, Ruth Beardsley, Penny Bradley, and Rhea Hubbard from Alexandra Neighbourhood House to talk to us about Child Care Month. Go ahead. This one here. You go for it.
Good afternoon. My name is Ruth Beardsley. I'm a senior manager with Options Community Services.
And I'm Rhea Hubbard, Director of Youth and Family Programs for Alexandra Neighbourhood House.
And we have a delegation here who are part of the Surrey Nonprofit Child Care Working Group. Anita Huberman is here, and other members from the community who are supporting the group. So we'd like to talk about childcare in Surrey, and to start with just the major shift in demographics. In 1976, there were under 40% of mothers with children under 16 in the paid workforce. That's changed significantly, and in 2012, the rate is over 73%. And for mothers with children under 3, that went from 28% to almost 70% of those mothers working. So in the past decade, childcare needs have changed, and the cost of childcare has changed. In order for families to survive and meet the costs, they're facing huge challenges. So it takes multiple incomes, more than one job to meet family needs. What we know in Surrey is that since 2000, there's been about 10 community reports calling for action, including 2 city policy documents, one the Child and Youth Friendly Strategy, the Poverty Reduction Strategy, and the IBM Smarter Cities Initiative in 2013. In 2014, the Surrey Board of Trade's successful championing of the childcare motion at the Canadian Chamber of Commerce. So we know that there's been a lot of positive steps, but we still have no coordinated action plan for childcare in Surrey. What we know is that in Surrey, only 12.4 spaces exist for every 100 children aged 0 to 12. This is the second worst ratio in the Lower Mainland. And this is particularly an issue for families who have children under 3 or for families who have school-aged children. And we know this from our Child Care Resource and Referral Program, where families come in asking for referrals for child care, that we can't give them enough information about programs where there are spaces, or that programs even serve a school catchment area. There's also few facilities that serve more than one age group, so there might be a 3 to 5 center or a school-aged care center, but you can't go to one center and have your whole group of children cared for. There's also a lack of space, amenity space, for new childcare programs to open. It's very difficult to find space in Surrey. Most of the community space, the churches, or spaces that are in good locations are already being used for childcare. So this is an issue. And it would be really helpful to have zoning requirements reviewed in light of that, so that childcare programs could open. When we looked at the group childcare centres in Surrey, we have a totally different picture than in other parts of the Lower Mainland. We have 93% of the centres being commercial, and only 7% are community nonprofit. We know that this is an important thing to consider because of what research tells us about commercial sites and nonprofit sites. In terms of quality of care for children. Childcare fees are up to $1,850 per month for an under 3 child, or up to $1,550 for a 3 to 5-year-old child in the private sector. You can see how that would be a huge cost for a young family. The other thing is that these fees are not translating into competitive wages for the early childhood educators who are working in centres. And what we hear from staff in our program at the Child Care Resource and Referral Program is that people are maybe living here, but are working in other places for better wages and benefits. Childcare costs are the second largest expense in a family's budget, so you can see why. We often hear from families that are on low income and receiving childcare subsidy that it's harder to find a spot, that some centres don't want to have families on subsidy because it's difficult for them to come up with the cost over and above the subsidy rate. And the other thing is, for families that have children who require extra support, it's very hard to find a space where you've got the support that your child might need, so they're turned away from centres. Parents are also relying heavily on informal, sometimes illegal care, a neighbor, a friend, and of course with variable quality. We heard from parents who say that they've had to miss work, or they're stressed at work, or they're leaving the workforce because of some of these childcare concerns. Parents also tell us that they're using several different arrangements for childcare in a week, so they might have a childcare provider for a couple of days, they might have a family member, they might have a neighbor or a friend. This is not in the best interest of children, but in order for parents to make ends meet, this is what they're doing. We've also heard from the school district, from principals that report some children are missing school to care for their younger siblings. And again, from the school principals, we hear that children are on their own in self-care after school hours. There's also a lot of grandparents who are caring for grandchildren in Surrey, and they may be in fragile health themselves. It's not an easy job caring for children, and they're with them for long hours. We know that the city has been involved in childcare and really want to recognize their involvement and what has worked, what has happened. We know that the city runs 90 licensed preschool classes in a number of locations across the city. We know that more recently there's been a community partnership approach where the city has worked with nonprofit agencies to open childcare programs. At Kensington Prairie with Alexandria Neighbourhood House, at Bridgeview Community Centre with Options Community Services, at the childcare centre here at City Hall with the YMCA. These are great steps forward, and we know that this has made a huge difference to families and to the operators in terms of what we're able to provide to families. The city is also running 4 licensed after-school programs and 8 MyZone drop-in programs. So the licensed programs meet the needs of working families. The MyZone do not meet the needs of working families. They're in some locations, they're not Monday to Friday. The other thing we know is that the Planning Department works closely with Fraser Health when there's a new application for a license. And that's an important role that they play in terms of determining whether a facility is appropriate for childcare. I'd like to just suggest, lay out sort of the different levels of childcare that exist in Surrey, and depending on the situation with the operator, with the site, with the philosophy. One is custodial care, where we know that basic health and safety supervision is provided. Second is developmental care, where there's child-focused programs, but they may not take into account the family or community context. What we'd like to see in all cases for families with young children is the availability of comprehensive care that's child-focused, family-centered, and integrated into the community. So comprehensive childcare, this integrated community sustainable strategy would improve child outcomes in terms of physical, emotional, mental well-being and health, supports family well-being, supports capacity of families and community connections for families, getting to know each other, being part of a community. Complements the workforce engagement. We know if families know their children are well cared for, they'll be able to participate in their workplace and be engaged. And it encourages social, economic, and social inclusion of all families in our community here in Surrey. Also contributes to financial prosperity, both for workplaces and for families.
So what does this mean for children and families in the City of Surrey? How can we make a Made in Surrey initiative to meet this overwhelming need? What is needed is a child care action plan that is specific to the needs of Surrey and built with a collaborative approach, using the expertise, skills, innovation, and collective commitment from local community agencies and public partners. It should be a plan that focuses on comprehensive child care that is integrated, sustainable, and strategic. A plan that can be implemented with adequate provincial funding and community support. This will require the nonprofit childcare sector to work closely and collaboratively and creatively with public partners. To create the additional 30,000 full-time and part-time spaces that are required, there will need to be specific strategies and timelines put into place, making sure that priority is given to creating childcare spaces that are high quality, affordable, and serve multiple age groups, especially within underserved neighborhoods. This comprehensive childcare action plan will also require community investments that are well connected with other early years and family supports. And lastly, it will also require all partners to lobby for, as well as leverage provincial and community resources. So to ensure that our children and families are getting the high-quality, affordable, comprehensive childcare that they deserve, we invite the city to join us in working together by asking that the city designate a city representative who will co-chair the Surrey Childcare Task Force, whose mandate will be to collectively develop a childcare action plan for Surrey. We also ask that staff from various city departments such as Parks and Recreation, Economic Development, Planning, Social Planning, Properties and Engineering be assigned to assist the Child Care Task Force in creating and implementing this action plan. And lastly, that Surrey Council receive regular updates from this task force to ensure that momentum and accountability is maintained. We know we can't do this alone, nor can we expect the city to do it on their own. So to fully address the needs of children and families, the Child Care Task Force will also seek representation from a variety of community partners, including the nonprofit Child Care Working Group represented here today, the Children's First and Middle Childhood Planning Tables, the Children's Partnership Office, the Surrey Board of Trade, Surrey School District, Ministry of Children and Families, Fraser Health, both the Public Health and the Community Care Facilities Licensing Office, United Way, Simon Fraser and Kwantlen Polytechnic Universities, the Ministry of Social Development and Social Innovation, and the Provincial Office of the Early Years. The key goals of the task force will be to create a common understanding of Surrey's childcare context. What are the challenges within Surrey? What have we already learned that is working and what isn't working in Surrey? And what opportunities are available to Surrey to meet the needs of Surrey's children and families? The task force will also focus their attention on the nonprofit sector's approach to creating comprehensive childcare spaces, looking for ways to expand sustainable, affordable, accessible, and high-quality childcare programs for multiple age groups. Each task force partner will be asked to determine how they can connect and contribute to the action plan to address Surrey's childcare needs. And finally, the task force will identify ways to streamline current requirements for establishing new childcare services. So on behalf of children and families in Surrey, we thank you for this opportunity to share with you about the current childcare needs in Surrey. And we look forward to moving ahead and working together with you to create a Surrey Childcare Action Plan. And we would welcome any questions or comments at this time.
Councillor LaFranc.
Thank you. Did I get that number right? Is it Surrey needs 30,000 new spaces?
30,000 full-time and part-time spaces, yes.
Wow. And how did you derive that number?
A couple of years ago, with the help of Lynelle Anderson from UBC's Human Early Learning Partnership, she did a gap assessment for childcare for Surrey, and we're able to determine that.
Wow.
Mayor Hempner.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Anything that advances child care for young families in Surrey, when we have probably more children looking for spaces than anywhere else in the province. I'm just wondering, in terms of economic support, what your response has been relative to your ask of the provincial government, because I'm assuming when you say non-profit, someone's going to have to pay something. So in my mind, that leads us to whose responsibility that is, and I'm just wondering how, when you've got them on the task force, have they agreed to participate?
We do receive some financial operating funds through the Child Care Operating Program through the province, and families can access the child care subsidy to assist them with covering their costs, but it will take more than that. Parent fees are there as well, so it will take a number of partners to address the financial needs.
And has the province agreed to participate in the Go Forward?
We are still in process of working with them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Villeneuve.
Thank you. Well, first of all, I want to recognize everyone that's here in the delegation, because I know there's been a lot of dedicated workers in this area. And I know Penny Bradley was mentioned that there's been a number of tables, too, over the last 15 years that have discussed this issue and done some reporting on it and recommendations, and you named a number of those reports. So I hope that the information in those reports you're able to use it so that you don't have to spend a lot of time on gathering new information to justify the need for childcare spaces. And I think that one area that I think is really important to explore, and I know happens in many places throughout North America, is the possibility of before and after school care in the schools. And that I think, because of the space requirements that you're talking about, might be an area to check out, because that is part of the issue in a growing city. There isn't a lot of space, and I think our city is really, I certainly know chairing social policy, that we're willing to reconsider and look at our zoning bylaws to ensure that they're not an inhibiting factor. But I, as the mayor, say that provincial funding is key. The city can play a really strong advocacy role. It can look at its zoning changes. It can participate and provide the information that we have. But really, it's funding, either from the national government or from the provincial government, that's key if you're really going to be able to assist the nonprofit sector in being able to play a more even role with the private sector in providing childcare. And as someone that has 3 grandchildren under 7, I know what that economic burden is on families to date. But it's some areas that we have to, I think outside of the box and not spend a lot of time, talking about establishing the need, because that's been proven in the city, and you've got obviously those details, but actually look at some kind of direct action that can be taken with the provincial government on this issue, because I think that's the only way we're going to move forward.
Thank you. Mayor Hepner's going to go second round.
Only because Councillor Villeneuve did trigger a couple of things for me, and that is, well, and I too have 5 grandchildren under 6, so I know, and when you put up their grandparents who are in frail health, even those grandparents who are in good health find it difficult to... I think that there are some other partners that could be at such a table. One would be the YMCA, who do provide some resources around child care as well. But I think there is also an opportunity to talk about zoning, and when we're promoting new industrial places, and whether or not they are including in new businesses spaces for childcare, because I'm reflecting on the conversations we had around this table when we developed the city hall plans, and how important childcare space was to us. And if we could show businesses that are building spaces, and we have one coming today, that a big one, that it's important when they're designing to have spaces for childcare. That may be some way to talk about where would the spaces exist in our city as well. So thank you for coming today.
Thank you. And I also have 2 grandchildren under the age of 5, and they do attend, one attends before and after daycare at the elementary school, and one attends the daycare at the elementary school in Langley. Both very good programs, both. So I think you'll see here a willingness. I know that probably 5 or 6 of us on this council table have grandchildren, and babysitting is a regular task for all of us. No, we're not. We're not. We all have our hands full, no question. But as you can see, there's a real concern on council as well for the daycare and child minding and all of the child care actions that we need to do. So I'm quite sure that this will be dealt with in certain areas by staff. We'll get some reports and some ideas back, and we'll work together with you and with the province, which is mandatory, to see what we can do and have better performance than we do now. Thank you for bringing this to our attention once again.
Thank you. Thank you.
Our next delegation is Dr. Jen Marchbank and Martin Rooney from LGBTQ. No, Martin.
Thank you. It's just me today. Mr. Rooney is unavailable.
Okay.
So thank you, Mayor and Council, for allowing me this opportunity to present to you. I think I have something on here. That one. So as you can see, I'm here to formally request a second year of an LGBTQ history display to be in the foyer during the week coming up to Surrey Pride Festival on June 28th. As you may already know, I am an academic from Simon Fraser University, and one of my projects is actually an oral history of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender history, queer history in the city of Surrey. It's quite an important history, and it's important, I think, that all generations and people from outside the community know of it as well. So you were very gracious in allowing this to be displayed last year, and what you may not know is I've already been working with staff who have been fantastic, and it's going to be a much more professional looking display. So this is we're already working on it, please allow it to go up. Okay. The focus of the display this year will be slightly different. With input from the diversity staff at Council, we have agreed that this year it will be a display of Canadian national history of the LGBT community and rights. And within that, we'll situate some specific Surrey events that are of actually national and international importance. So what you see here is a very early 1971 Toronto Gay Pride campaign. So these are examples of potential elements of the exhibit. You can see how sophisticated the campaigning techniques were. What we will be raising up is that although we had the famous Prime Minister Trudeau's statement of keeping politics out of people's bedrooms, we had that, even still by the 1980s, there was still being persecution of the LGBT community, and this should not be something that gets forgotten, that you all know the difference between passing a policy and its full implementation. So the exhibit will also show things such as continued raids on gay and lesbian services. And I love this one, this was just so camp. This is from the very first national demonstration Nous Demandons, which not many people know about. I'm just going to do a quick straw poll. Has anybody in the audience actually heard of this campaign in 1971 that isn't married to me? So that, you see the importance of raising some of this history. Oops, I think I need to go back one. No, I didn't. So I mentioned that included in this will be the importance of the history of Surrey, of what people in Surrey have done, not just to make a difference in Surrey, but there's been lots of that done, but also nationally and internationally. You may recognise these books. This was the issue raised in 1997 when schoolteacher James Chamberlain requested permission from the school board to put age-appropriate books into the schools. These were the actual 3 books. Trust me, they're not that radical. Anyway, as you will know, this lasted until the Supreme Court ruling in 2002, where Chief Justice Beverly McLaughlin announced that tolerance is always age-appropriate, which made national policy coming out of this city. So that campaign also resulted in an inaugural event here in Surrey. It meant Martin, who is unfortunately not able to be with us, he was dared to hold a dance, a gay dance, which he did. You don't dare, Martin. Which he did. And from that dance, over the years, came 3 organisations with which you are familiar: the Surrey Youth Alliance, Surrey Pride Society, at that time known as Out in Surrey, and the Empire of the Peace Arts Monarchists Association. A second important role was that of Martin Rooney, who, when he was detained, inspected, investigated and refused entry at the US border in 2008 for being HIV positive. This is a piece of publicity from that campaign at that time. After that, he launched a campaign that resulted in the overturn in 2010 of the US's HIV and AIDS travel ban. Up until that point, if you were answered yes to the question, are you HIV positive, you were refused entry into the US. Martin was refused entry on the way to buy a turkey. However, that is a piece of international policy change that came from this city, and I think it's very important that people in this city know these 2 things. So, from that came the campaign Red Ribbons for Life, which takes place annually and raises money for the HIV food bank, which is very necessary for people who are living with HIV and need to have a high-protein diet. And I'm sure that you've all at some point been involved and connected with this in some way. So these images I'm showing you just now are of the various organisations that have grown up in Surrey over the years. This one, they're here today. Would Youth for a Change like to stand up? These are the young people who are making new histories. They have been spending their time over the past 6-8 months working on intergenerational projects, on writing and making public their history and the history of LGBTQ seniors. They're also about to embark on another project devising educational materials regarding elder abuse in the LGBT community. So they're also here tonight to back up my request. So just to end, I was to say thank you once again for allowing staff to work. I look forward to continue working with them and with you. We invite you to formally permit this exhibit and ask you to come and sign our visitors book. And obviously, if you have any questions, I'm open to answer them.
Thank you, Jen. I think we do. Vera Lefranc, Councillor Lefranc.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Jen, and thank you for all that you do in the community. It's pretty amazing. You haven't been here for that long, but you're pretty involved and committed. And Youth for a Change, it's lovely to see so many familiar faces in the crowd, the young generation, and such a good role model, because as we know, a disproportionate number of homeless youth are from the LGBTQ community. And it's so important to continue these Pride events to make sure that they know that they're not alone, that they have community around them, which I really appreciate. I also want to say that I'm sorry Martin's not here today, because I've known him for almost 20 years, and he's been a very quiet, not so quiet, quiet advocate for real change, and it's pretty substantial, the overturning the travel ban, the HIV travel ban, and it kind of is under the radar in Surrey, and it's something that we should all be so proud of. So thank you for bringing forward this request, and I really look forward to seeing the new and improved display in our beautiful atrium. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you, and I agree with what you've said. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor Hepner.
Except for the part where Martin's quiet.
Yes.
And thanks, Jen. It's good to see you again this year, and to all of the young people that you've brought with you here today. I don't think that we're going to probably need the kind of time that we generally take in terms of looking at a matter and then coming back with a report. I think that it's fair to say I'm quite happy to make the resolution right now that we continue to work with you for that display in City Hall, and I would so resolve.
Thank you very much, Mayor.
All in favour, opposed, carried. And I also have seen heads nodding at the table here, staff and managers saying that obviously that they're working with you and it's all set to go. So we look forward to it. And I want to thank the youth, and I want to thank you for coming out. Give our regards to Martin, and we'll look forward to your Gay Pride weekend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, let's hope it doesn't rain.
And our final delegation late in the day is Philip Bellefontaine, Transportation Manager, City of Surrey. The late into the day comment was, I know you can do this quickly, but we'll listen attentively.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair and Council. We are 5 days now away from the conclusion of the transportation and transit plebiscite, and as we near that period of time, it's an appropriate time for us to do three things. Recognise the support of and hard work of all of those who have put support for the advocacy efforts over the last few weeks. Provide an overview of the work that we've been doing here in Surrey, and to conclude with some further thank yous to all of those who have contributed. Although over the last few weeks we have framed this very much as a Surrey effort, it's been a lot more than that. The campaign has been a collective effort of a very broad and diverse group, including business organisations, student groups, community leaders, as well as advocates for seniors and youth, and all of whom have recognised that for 35 cents a day, some $3.5 billion worth of transportation improvements would come here to Surrey as a result of the Mayor's Council plan. It has truly been a pleasure working with so many committed and enthusiastic, intelligent and innovative people. As such, I'm always a little bit reluctant to name individuals, but I think it is appropriate that one or two people who have really led by example are mentioned tonight. Elizabeth Modell and Bonnie Burnside from the Downtown Surrey BIA, Anita Huberman and Craig Amundsen of Surrey Board of Trade, as well as Jessica Larson, Alex McGowan, Deepak Sharma and Patrick Meehan of Quantum and SFU Students Association. Can somebody help me with this? I'm not going to spend too much time talking about all the different work that's been going on with the engagement and outreach, because that is something through our weekly briefings to Mayor and Council that you will be aware of. But I do want to give us an overview of some of the highlights over the last few weeks. There have been 12 significant city and coalition events, such as the campaign launch and the city festivals. Staff have presented to some 10 city committees, and this has ensured that memberships of those committees can spread the word through their own networks. Staff have also supported a number of meetings promoted by Surrey Board of Trade for business dialogue, and these have taken place throughout the city. and Board of Trade, Downtown Surrey BIA again, but also Newton BIA. So that's been something that we've been very happy to support. It's important that staff within the organisation have been made aware of the benefits to the city. So we've had 6 staff information sessions, including the works yards. We here at Surrey have hosted a number of South of Fraser meetings for stakeholders, and that's an opportunity for us to share information and give out resources and make sure that everybody is working in the same direction. There's been a tremendous amount of outreach, and this is some of the less glamorous side of the work, and that's involved people out at Transit Exchange, at Surrey Central and elsewhere. And we have had literally thousands of conversations, individual conversations with residents. And much of this has been taking place on staff's volunteering their time. And we've done that in coordination with the Mayor's Council and the Better Transportation and Transit Coalition. There have been lots of events, and we've taken a multifaceted approach. There have been the very formal events, as I've mentioned, such as the campaign launch, where we've had media in attendance and lots of special guests, lots of people in suits, including myself. But it's been very important that these events have been accessible to everybody. So as well as those, we've attended and supported events put on by others. So we've been present at, for example, the Quantland Students Association registration event. We have been talking one-on-one with as many residents as we possibly can at events such as Party for the Planet and the Vasaki Parade. But we've also used our facilities to spread the word of other people's efforts. So we've used our social media platforms and the city's website to promote other work. Social media is now a very important component of any modern-day communication strategy, and this has been no different. So the staff very quickly developed a comprehensive strategy for us to maximise use of this. And we have seen a tremendous amount of success through this approach. And so far, our website has seen has had 12,500 views for the campaign. Our Twitter account has touched upon 182,000 people. We describe those as impressions, and an impression is when somebody has clicked on a link or a picture or uploaded a video. So it's people have actually taken the time to actually look at what we're promoting. 158,000 impressions on Facebook, 15,000 impressions on LinkedIn, and our YouTube videos have been seen by close to 5,000 people. So more, if you like, traditional advocacy has still been important. We have put up posters at rec centres, rack cards, which have also been circulated to civic facilities and distributed at events. We have had newspaper wraps, print ads, and we delivered a household mailer to 138,000 homes in the city. We have made maximum use of the city's own assets. So there have been 3 rounds of transit shelter ads, each one at about 60 locations in the city. We've used our digital signs, and this one here is at King George Boulevard, approaching Patillo Bridge, and that sees some 60,000 vehicles per day driving past it. So a tremendous amount of outreach and exposure through that approach. Voting results, information from Elections BC indicate that the final results may be available in mid to late July, so it's going to be a number of weeks before we know the outcome of the plebiscite. As of last Wednesday, so Elections BC have provided weekly numbers on returns. As of last Wednesday, regionally, 655,000 ballots have been returned, and that represents close to a 42% voter turnout. And here in Surrey, there have been 111,000 ballots returned, which represents a 38% voter turnout. So as I've noticed, voting, as I've mentioned already, voting ends this Friday at 8 p.m. And for those of you who want to leave it to the very last second, you can go to the local plebiscite service office, of which there is one here at Central City. So as I say, I didn't want to dwell too long on the mechanics of the process, and instead, in my last 2 or 3 slides, concentrate more on some of the other outcomes of the plebiscite process that otherwise would have gone unreported. So there have been many events, activities and initiatives over the last 14 weeks, and it's become very evident that this has represented more than just a campaign for better transportation. New relationships have been established and existing partnerships strengthened, and these have been based on shared values of wanting to see a successful and a better Surrey. And this has been achieved at many levels. It's been true for us as an organisation here at the City, so between staff and between departments, we have, I believe, are an even more effective Surrey team than we were when we started. It's been true for the City and our partners, such as the BIAs and the Boards of Trade. And it's been true, I think, for the relationships between some of the groups that we pulled together through this process and who I know have now created long-lasting connections. Importantly also, we have seen evidence that transportation is being institutionalised in people's efforts. So, for example, KPU and SFU see this this voting period very much as the beginning of what is going to be a longer-lasting campaign and advocacy for better transportation. And what's also been very clear to me is that here in Surrey we have a very strong and healthy community of groups and individuals who are making Surrey a success. It's also been more than just about transportation. This presentation has been labelled the Metro Vancouver Transportation and Transit Plebiscite, but it's a lot more than that. You see in front of you staff from some dozen different sections within the organisation who represent the spectrum of city services and who have had a part to play in this effort. It's no accident that so many aspects of the organisation have been involved, because the plebiscite has been as much about the economic well-being of the city and the residents who live here. It's been about improving the environment. It's been about providing equal access and opportunities for the citizens who live here to healthcare, recreation and places of worship. And it's been about creating and shaping a world-class city. The other important takeaway for me has been that we have here in Surrey a workforce that does a lot more than just work at the City of Surrey, but that really truly works for the City of Surrey. So in conclusion, on behalf of Mayor and Council and staff, I want to thank everybody who has supported the campaign over the last 14 weeks, both within the organisation and external. The role of staff in promoting the benefits of the Mayor's Council plan has really only been possible because of the support of our Mayor and Council, and that support has been shown through a number of ways: being active on social media, supporting and speaking at events, working within your own networks, and as your roles as chairs and members on the various city committees. But most importantly, we have been able to be successful and effective because of the clear vision that Mayor and Council have given us as staff, and for the strong local and regional leadership throughout the plebiscite process. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mayor Hepner.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Philip, for coming in the winding days, reviewing what has been, in my mind and in my 30 years of being part of this local government, an astonishing show of collaboration and support and ingenuity. And if irrespective of where this vote goes, it is not for anything else that we could have done, because you and all of the team in the city have done an amazing yeoman's job of showing continued not only support, but the number of volunteer hours that has gone into this, with the enthusiasm that I've seen from everyone, including, by the way, you forgot that we stood on the street corner as well with signs. Thank you very much. But everyone banding together, I agree so wholeheartely with you as you described that so much more has been gained from this exercise than the plebiscite, which is really important to win, but equally important to show that we all believe. And I think this has really galvanized us as a city, and I thank you very much for your presentation today and for all of the work that the Surrey team has done in collaboration with a very disparate set of partners, unknown more than we have ever seen before. So I cannot say thank you enough.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I too would like to thank you for this presentation. I'm just curious, why is it going to take so long to get the results? Has Election BC...
we're unsure, but throughout this process, Elections BC have struggled from day one. They're not geared up for a plebiscite. They've never done one before, so they've been learning as they've gone along a little bit. I won't use this forum to criticise, but they have had some adjustments to make, so I think that's why it's taking them a little while.
Okay, well, thank you, and hopefully it'll be a positive result.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you to Philip and all the staff and everybody that's worked so hard. As Mayor Hepner's alternate at some of the meetings, I want to thank staff for taking the time and the effort to walk me through step by step so that I could continue to give some good information up to and including sitting in the meetings and texting me when I needed that promotion. So I want to thank you all. We've worked really hard, and as Mayor Hepner says, win or lose, it's pulled the city together, but let's hope for a win. Thank you, and thank you very much. And I will now call for adjournment. Thank you. All in favor, opposed, carried.